各位观众，大家好，欢迎收看我们美南电视的 JxJ 论坛。很开心的，我们这个礼拜又是同样的由我跟 Jim Notley 一起来主持。Jim, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. I'm trying to make sense out of this crazy world that we're living in. And it just, like we say, opening every week, it gets crazier and crazier every week. And I think it will continue to get crazier and crazier, at least till the end of this year.
You know, you're absolutely right, Jim. We literally just started recording, and I wanted to tell you this, but we ran out of time, but it's okay if we're on air. I look forward to taping with you because you're a wise man, and you have a lot of experience, and you're able to provide an unbiased view from different political spectrum and what moderates and what middle America really thinks. As for me, for the past few months that we've been taping, I've gotten very emotional. But it also shows the Democratic Party's elitist views, which I admit that I did not value what you thought was important in this election. Instead, I held on to, while COVID, 230,000 people died. I remember talking about masks. I couldn't understand where you or the or supporters of this conservative ideology says that is not what motivates to vote for a certain candidate. There are different topics that matters more, like taxes, like law and order. How we look at media. To me, it's facts, and of course, it's logic, it's real, but it doesn't mean people would agree. And the talking points have been wrong. I think it's a reckoning for both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. Would you say that?
Oh yes, very, very much so. Very, very much so. I think both parties are very confused about their identity. I think both parties are fighting with each other. And those fights have grown so strong now that they no longer view each other just as political opponents, but rather as enemies. And they both have adopted the idea that in order to win, you have to devastate or eliminate the other guy, rather than win, lose, come back together again, move forward, figure out a better solution. And the other thing that nobody wants to talk about, but it's really true, they're both cratering from within. They're being torn apart by many, many different forces.
And extremists, far right or far left.
Far right and far left. And I think they're both very foolish for leaving the middle open. I think they're secondarily foolish for not having messages that appeal to the middle, because when everything is so polarized, there's an obvious truism that the decisions are going to be made by the people in the middle. So because things are so balanced out on the polls, they're so strong on the polls, and look at the way the returns are coming in, whether you measure popular vote or you measure vote by each of these individual states. The other thing that's going on is I heard one of the pundits say it last night, and I thought it was very correct. If you look at the state by state graphics of this election, you see all the red in the rural areas, and you see specks of blue in the urban areas. And some people are saying we're divided by state. Well, that's not really true. That just happens to be how one state or another, how one party won a slight advantage, the numbers in that state. Some went to Biden, some went to Trump, et cetera, or the senators. But the biggest divide now has been between the urban areas and the rural areas. If you look at the graphics of each state, they all look the same. The urban areas overwhelmingly have been voting for Mr. Biden, and the rural areas have been overwhelmingly voting for Mr. Trump. Every state is that way. Even California is that way. Even New York is that way. Even Illinois, which is probably the most population-centric state in the country, where such a huge percentage of Illinois residents live in metropolitan Chicago. And it was certainly the case in Texas, which we probably know better than any place else. So I think both parties have lost their way. They're both groping. I think everybody's having a hard time reconciling just what happened within the electorate within the last several weeks. And one of the things that I found interesting yesterday, I read a very informative article in a publication called The Atlantic. By the way, stop me.
I read The Atlantic, yeah.
Yeah, stop me when you want to translate.
No, I want to hear this. I really want to hear your take, only your take.
Okay. There was a very interesting article, I'll email it to you, about in The Atlantic, which is everybody recognizes it's a very far left publication, but it was a harsh criticism of how the pollsters not only have gotten things wrong for the second major election, but they did two big things that the author didn't forgive them for. Number one, they didn't fix the problem the first time. They coulda, they shoulda, they made the second mistake the same as the first, but they made it bigger and they made it louder. The second thing they did wrong was they misled the American people, and they did it by being bigger and louder because the mainstream media kept relying on the polls. And if you look not only at the presidential election, which they missed, they basically had almost every state by Mr. Biden up between 4 and 12%, depending on the state. And almost every state other than New York, California, et cetera, came in very, very, very close. They totally missed the broad-based support that Mr. Trump had, particularly the momentum at the end. The other thing that they missed hugely badly were the Senate races. And Senate is probably, the composition of the Senate, at least in my observation, is as important as the executive right now.
Agreed.
For all kinds of reasons. So they were very, very critical, and they called on the major pollsters to retire, get out of the business, let new people with new approaches get started again. Now, having said that, there were a few pollsters that were pretty notorious for calling things correctly, and they did get it. They got it right in 2016, and they got it right this time. And my interpretation of all of this is that traditional polling methods don't work in today's world. They don't work because people will not sit on the phone and answer questions. You can't get to them because of cell phone laws, and people simply are not going. Everybody with social media, people are so concerned about privacy, hacking, invasion. They're not going to sit there and tell the sanctity of the privacy of a voting booth. They're not going to tell a stranger over the phone that calls and says, we need to give a poll. They're not going to do it. I never answer a telephone number that I don't know. It's a massive waste of time.
It's automatically blocked already.
Yeah. Let alone a possible a leak that could cause me or my family or my businesses some harm. Which is the whole cybersecurity issue is a whole nother thing. And I think the real loser in all of this, Jimmy, I mean, we're all really frustrated. Many people I know are emotional wrecks, whichever way their own political leanings are, and whatever. There's an old saying that where you stand depends on where you sit. In other words, your opinions are formed by what you hold dear and what you are. But the biggest loser in this, frankly, is integrity, is credibility, is confidence in the system and in each other. And whichever way this election goes, or say the series of election goes, we have tremendous amount of healing to do to get back to what's important in the United States.
Absolutely. I think what I say is, what I'm adding on is that we all lost. As Americans, we have all lost. And everything became radicalized, everything became politically motivated. When you talk about, what he said was really touching: integrity and character and morality and faith in the system. This is an attack on the fundamental of this democracy, of the democratic process. We will get to that in a little bit. I will ask you about, without bias, about your take on the call, armed response to the polling centers, pre-agreed, whether there's fraud or not, whether it is or not. We could talk about that. Before, I didn't even want to bring that up. Now we go back to what he said. I want to respond to it. I agree, all of them, but there's a few things I'm going to throw out there, just for our audiences to think. First of all, no matter who wins, we lost. In order for this to proceed, like you said, the Senate, the House, the Supreme Court, and the White House, I want just one side to win them all and win by a lot. If it's Trump, go ahead, win by a lot, to avoid this kind of divide and tearing up. If it's Biden, then win by a lot and win all three. And that didn't happen, and it will not happen. The pollsters were wrong. The pollsters were wrong in every which way, because shy Trumpers are real. I discredited that before. A lot of people did not want to be accused or attacked. A lot of people will not answer honestly about their inclinations. A lot of people that do vote for a certain party or in the rural areas do not have internet, or they don't have the time to deal with this, but they will go on and vote for who they believe is best for them. And going back to the rural areas, the rural areas surrounding the urban centers. Rural areas and the poorer states, the most economically disadvantaged states, are overwhelmingly red. Rural areas that have been left behind by technology's innovation, by this wealth divide, by this global industrialization, has been left behind. The disenfranchised. The Democratic Party did not learn that 4 years ago. If they did, they are so arrogant. I can even say we are so arrogant that we did not address it. Instead, we just wait for Mr. Trump's mistakes. We thought that COVID, the 230,000 dead, is enough. We thought that him telling people to inject bleach is enough, and all the lies and his morality issues. In the end, none of that actually, obviously, it did not work. Look at the numbers. They were hopeful. Democrats were hopeful it would be a landslide. I never thought it would be, but this is the worst case scenario, which was predicted. But this mess, this back and forth, this violence, whether it's perpetrated by either side, no true American see this. Both sides are saying we're fighting to protect your right. We're fighting for our freedom, to protect our First Amendment or Second Amendment rights. That big part of that is true, but the way we're doing it, the way that, I'm sorry to do say this, but I cannot help but condemn what some of these extremists in Trump's camp is doing by calling for armed response, by discrediting a post-poll office where there are poll workers from both sides of the party, where it's an agreed upon system before the election. If you're losing, then you cry foul. Only if you're losing. That doesn't work that way. If you have questions, in 2000, Al Gore probably could have won, but you don't see Democrats asking people to go in the streets to protest or to create this. Now, you know what? I should take that back. I don't want to make it a political issue anymore. And I want to ask you about this.
Okay.
When you talk about the hijacking of the conservative values from the Republican Party, this has become a party of Trump, a cultist. We're all moderates. How do I put this? I'm sorry. If Trump was a Democrat today, I still would not vote for him. If Biden represented was on the Republican ticket, I would still vote for Biden. What Trump has done is hijack conservative values, made it his own. And a lot of us have no choice but to vote for what's so-called the lesser of two evils, or to pick a side. Why can't the Republican Party have a better candidate that reflects the true values of Americans? And we can say the same about the Democratic Party. Where we are at today, I'm scared. I'm fearful for our next generation. Jim, what would you say to the people that are protesting outside poll centers? What do you say to the people that are on the internet spreading conspiracy theories and saying that there's voter fraud, there's ballot fraud, and that Trump has won already? What do you say? What do we do? How do we reconcile that?
Well, I have, from all the information I'm getting, and I don't trust very much of what I see or hear. I have to try to understand what's behind it, what the logic, the presentation is, who the people are doing the talking and sending me the information. Some people are more credible to me than others. I happen to be a big believer, a follower of the Wall Street Journal editorial page, which is different than the Wall Street Journal reporting pages, etc. And I read and listen to things all across the board, trying to balance them out and make sure that things add. I saw some statistics today, just to give you an example, some statistics today that showed that year to date, the total number of deaths in the United States is running well below in 2020, year to date, the number of deaths in the year 2019. In other words, fewer people are dying. And you can extrapolate that out till the end of the year just doing simple math. How then do you account for the 230 or 240 excess deaths being attributed to COVID? You should have an addition, not a subtraction. So something else is going on. And that's where the analysis stopped. Something else is going on. I derive from this two huge things. Number one, that's the first time anybody that's been giving me information about COVID has ever taken a step back and saying, maybe these numbers aren't working. Let's get to the basis. The second thing is, I think the COVID statistics attributed, or the death statistics attributed to COVID, are bogus. And I've thought that right from the beginning. I know I'm touching a sensitive subject with you, but I want to do it anyway. It's a sensitive subject with many, many other people. And all the things that come to COVID, and I'll take you one step further. About a week ago, maybe two, President Trump said a lot of the COVID deaths are being attributed to COVID because the medical establishment gets paid more money when they attribute it. The medical establishment went bonkers at that. All the doctors were up in arms, hospitals, etc. There is a wonderful article in today's New York Times that laid very carefully about how that is exactly what's happening, including both Medicare and Medicaid reimbursing doctors and hospitals a 20% premium when death is attributed to COVID. In other words, Trump was factually correct, but he said things that were politically incorrect. So my point is, there is so much going on that we have to take a step back, try to understand what's what. Personally, I really don't know what's right. But when I look at some of these things, I say, the reason I don't know what's right is because nobody else knows what's right either, and they're trying to influence me in other ways. So I'm just glad that I and other people that I trust have the ability to sort things out. But I would admit, in many things, I'm as confused and uncertain and fearful as everyone else.
You have been a lifelong Republican. You have ran for United States Congress on the Republican ticket.
Mm-hmm.
You have traveled the world, built a successful business, raised a great family. Mm-hmm. You don't have to stick your neck out to even, because we are the benefactors of what is led to believe to be Mr. Trump's policies.
Mm-hmm.
You always say that we seem far apart, but we have similar stance on so many issues.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, one of the big points I have is for Asian American. I'm advocating for Asian Americans as minorities.
Yep.
We're not sitting here to ask for help. We're just saying that because a lot of Trump supporters admit that there is racism. They admit there is, but they may not attribute it to him. They might say that racism is always there, that he may be legitimized, but they can overlook that. And I bring this up to relate back to COVID.
Okay.
I disagree with you. You already know I would on this because COVID should not be politicized, become a political. I look at other countries. I look at China, Hong Kong, but why are these countries opened up the economy? Because they did shut down and did believe in science and everyone wore masks. Then I realized something. The argument is it should not be on the president. We as Americans are selfish inherently. We don't want to be told what to do. So whether you wear a mask or not, it's up to you. Whether you want to bag your groceries and not touch anything, it's up to you. And then when you say COVID deaths, yes, we cannot speak in terms of absolute truths or absolute facts, right? Trump does that. There's some parts of truth, perhaps I will fact check that about the media. Because the way the conspiracy theories work is that the media is controlled by liberal because they make money, profit from it. The medical field is run by profit and they're controlled by anything we don't agree on. We spin it as conspiracy theory that's against Trump and is being bullied. I don't look at things that way. I look at what's happening in other countries. I look at what's around us. As Americans, we're selfish. Until your parents died from COVID or your child, you're not gonna face it. Until Herman Cain died from not wearing a mask at a rally, he didn't think COVID is real. Until Trump got COVID, he told people that is fake news. Do we listen to him to inject ourselves with bleach? The argument could be, well, you don't have to listen to the president. Come on. As a president, this is not politics. You have the responsibility to speak based on facts and to not have hearsay. The argument will always be, oh, Trump is not presidential. He may have multiple lawsuits and not release taxes and all these things, but he still did these things that economy is important. I get it. I cannot criticize someone for wanting to save more taxes, to want to have law and order, and to fight communism, and to maintain law and order. What I'm concerned is that these ideologies are hijacked by him only. These ideologies are shared by Americans across the board spectrum. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, who doesn't want to have a safe environment to work and to live? Who doesn't want to have quality medical care? I mean, nobody wants to pay more taxes to the IRS. Come on. But it's been hijacked. Just like the narrative by the Republicans has been, which this is on the Democrats, that they did not fight enough, that Biden and the Democrats equals socialism, that BLM equals riots and unrest, that Democrats support criminals, and that Democrats support legalizing illegal immigrants because that's their support base. And that free healthcare to these freeloaders, because I work hard for my money and I don't want to support. I mean, these narratives are so extreme. There is extremists in the Democratic Party, right? The left.
Jimmy, let me interrupt you for a moment. I think you're taking some of my points from 15 minutes ago when I said they're not only extreme, those comments are positioned to mislead, deceive the people about by trying to undermine the strength of your arguments by stretching too far and telling things that are not fully credible on either side. And both sides have undertaken the same techniques. And I think it's a damn shame.
It is. This negative campaigning, delving to this is why I say, I know that what I'm saying seems biased. It wasn't like this before Trump got in office. It started 4 years ago. Hillary's email gate. What happened to that? Did she go to jail? No. What happened to Obama's birther issue? He's not boarded. What happened to that? And now we have this Hunter Biden email, which I don't know if I did send you the article. I will send you all articles. It's been proven by non-partisan and by international media. This is made up by Hong Kong, Apple Daily. The guy was caught. They admitted it. But yet, by not controlling it, maybe the media should have publicized, because then it helps a conspiracy theory say, hey, look at this. They're not publicizing it. Even if they did, to me, it has nothing to do with the election. That's the sun. The fact is, it's not real, but yet I dismissed it. Jim, I said, hey, it's conspiracy. And you know what? But to this one side, it's not. You have to prove it to them that's a conspiracy. Yeah. You cannot just, this claim is not, just shove it under the rug. That was a mistake.
See what we have to do, if you believe in integrity and credibility, honestly, I think they always say that the first two branches of government, executive and legislative, are the two most powerful pieces. And that may be. But I think the foundation, the bedrock, is our rule of law and our court system. We cannot afford to risk losing that, because the way we sort out the Hunter Biden mess is through the court system. The way we sort out, unfortunately, the mess that's been created over these elections is through the court system. And we're absolutely I think we're going to see that happen. And I heard several people today say that Mr. Trump's lawsuits have no basis in fact, they have no evidence, and so they will be dismissed. Maybe that's the case. I really have no ability to make a judgment of that. But to me, the courts are the only credible, independent method to arbitrate and conclude about what's going on and set us back and make I don't know that anybody can make the right decision, but probably the most accurate and equitable decision or series of decisions. And I'm very afraid that no matter which side wins, that we're going to see an erosion of the Justice Department. We've already seen the compromises and erosion of the FBI, which had been the premier law enforcement agency in the world. Evidence problems, perjury, it goes all up and down the scale. And I think it's a damn shame. We have not just a lot of healing, like I said 10, 15 minutes ago, but we have a lot of restoration of everything, a lot of rebuilding to put, as the old nursery rhyme goes, to put Humpty Dumpty back together again here.
Jim, everything you said, I felt that the last 2 days, 3 days, even the first night when Mr. Trump was ahead, I had already said, hey, no matter who wins, there's a reckoning, on our system. Other countries are watching.
Yeah.
Totalitarian regimes and dictators are cheering for the demise of our great country. I look back at history. Nazi Germany, when Hitler was elected, he was elected in a purely democratic country, fair and square. He won the election. It took 10 years to dismantle that system, to turn it into Hitler, into fascism and Nazis. And look at what happened. Mm-hmm. I see the beginning of a very dangerous slope. Mm-hmm. No matter what party you stand on, we always say, can we go across party line? Once again, I vote based on candidate. I'm not some young buck that wants to go to the street to protest and want to have socialism. I benefit from Trump's, what's perceived as his policies. In reality, we're talking about facts, it's not about politics. A lot of his policies, Republican policies, does not really help the disenfranchised and the poor. Mm-hmm. Just like a lot of Democratic policies does not really help these so-called minorities. Look at what happened with the Latino vote. The Latino vote abandoned the Democratic Party because they're so arrogant and they did not really have policies to help them. And I've always tried so hard, Jim, that I work tirelessly and volunteering to get the Asians to vote. I don't want to vote for a certain party. I want to
vote.
Voting is power. It's your privilege to vote.
Participate.
It's a right that we have to make. Well, did vote.
And do your homework before you vote. Come
Jim,
to make your decisions.
That right there, though, is spoken by me and you, and that's because we're privileged. A lot of immigrants, it's hard for them to be knowledgeable because there's no translation. Like in Republican-controlled counties, they don't allow a Chinese ballot or Vietnamese or Spanish ballot. They don't want you to vote. For us, we are informed because it's easy for us. We're from here. I registered the moment I got out of high school automatically. But for these people, it's harder. It's a hurdle, right? Mm-hmm. Would you agree on that? Would you say that?
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. And you're leading to something that I think is a very important paradox that is becoming apparent in everything we're talking about. It used to be that the Democrats were the party of the common man.
Not anymore.
And in many aspects, immigrants, legal immigrants. And it used to be that the Republicans were the elitists, the country club set, the party of big business.
Not anymore. It's flipped.
It's changing. Donald Trump is acknowledged by everyone as a populist candidate. He's ironically appealing more to African Americans and Hispanics.
Latinos. Asians. I have the numbers. We finally got the Asians to come out and vote, Jim, at the record numbers. And the record numbers include record numbers of us voting for Trump. That's shocking. That makes me realize we have to think of not to beat it, but to say, were their needs addressed? Why is this happening?
We need to understand, one of my favorite publications, not just the Wall Street Journal, but Forbes magazine. And the guy who created Forbes, Steve Forbes' grandfather, had a great saying. With all thy getting, in other words, if you're materialistic, get things. With all you're getting, get understanding. We have to understand this world that we're living in, and who we're living in it with. We have to understand all those things. And right now, I think everything is so distorted, so cloudy, so confused, and because we don't understand it,
Jim,
vertigo, and people are afraid. The uncertainty is really tearing us apart.
What you're saying is absolutely true. I can understand that, but that's also from an intellectual elitist point.
Yeah.
It's not, I want to understand, you understand, but for a lot of folks, it's easier to not understand, to just follow what Twitter or Instagram or have hate and to believe in a mantra. You keep repeating a lie, it becomes real. And this applies to both parties. Republicans say Democrats are lying, Democrats say they're lying. And then once you paint the media as always biased and conspiracy, once you paint justice system department as that, or the FBI, then there's no more public trust in these institutions. I don't believe that all media is biased. I don't believe that they're bought off. The media reports on something that the administration does. Mr. Trump has said things that need to be reported on. He has done things that need to be reported on. He welcomes that. Now, is it a strategy that works? It does. But you cannot blame the media for reporting it. Me and you, we're volunteer. We're not paid to do this. Am I saying something to support the no. Are you saying something to report? No, we're not paid. We're saying what we see, what we feel, what we experienced. Mm-hmm. I firmly believe in journalistic integrity. Yeah. I don't believe in little French websites or QAnon conspiracies. I don't believe in that. I don't believe there's ultra left-wing Republican, Democratic conspiracy websites either. And most importantly, I don't believe in media that has been proven to be paid for and bought by foreign governments. That we cannot. And we've been proven that as the Chinese media, as Chinese Americans, as someone that you know, they are paid and bought off by China. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
this is
frightening. It's frightening.
And yet the lies they spread, people believe. Look, you want to support one candidate, great. Taxes, gun rights, whatever it is. But don't support them because you believe in some conspiracy news like Hunter Biden or these unsubstantiated claims. Those are not what you should be using to make an informed judgment on voting. Every time I talk to you, it feels like I'm so worked up and so emotional. Jim, it's because I have many groups of friends, being from here and being uniquely American, but understanding the Chinese view, I hear from both sides. And I'm the only foolish man that comes out to speak up because really, like, I could just enjoy my wine and cigars, and I could go to Austin and rent a boat. I don't need to do this. I hear it all, and then I come and talk to you, and I dump it all emotionally. Every time I talk to you, I feel better, James.
Well, let's take that. What you said about Trump, Trump. What's interesting is the media has played another game that most people don't fully appreciate, and that is, you remember 10 years ago, CNN used to have a slogan that said "all news all the time." Well,
it's like Fox.
Yeah, but what it is now, it's all Trump all the time. And it's like the media has allowed Trump, for good or for bad, and I think most of it's for bad because they don't like him, is to define everything. And what they do is following him around. Fox News has looked at CNN and said about MSNBC that Trump is the best thing they've ever had because it makes their ratings. What they want to do is fight with Trump, and it causes their audiences to go up. Okay, but while they're doing that, two other huge things aren't happening. One is people forget that there's a whole big world out there, and there's all kinds of other things going on and all kinds of other news that people aren't paying attention to because all the resources are focused on Trump. And it's out of all of that that we get understanding, et cetera. And then the next thing is the mainstream media can only have one or two or three headlines at any one time. And when Trump or the elections or COVID dominate everything else, we forget about immigration. We forget about taxes. We forget about the environment. We forget about foreign relations. All those other things that are still bubbling up out there and that are influencing everything don't get talked about, don't get written about, don't get communicated. And we really have to go look for them. That's why, and I've mentioned Wall Street Journal, I've mentioned some of the other things, Forbes. That's why The Economist is so important and so good, because it has a worldwide perspective. I don't really care about what goes on in Albania, but you know what? Something might be there that could be important, and I sure want to have somebody let me know if and when it does. So anyway.
No, well, everything you said is absolutely right on point. The only part is that with media is the media's role is to report on news, and we're supposed to decipher information and not make news. But
no, that's right.
Generating news for viewership to drive our ratings. But to be fair, Trump does create a lot of news, and it worked for him.
It does, sure.
Positive, negative. But we don't want to have this kind of negative campaigning. We don't want to have this kind of divided politics. And I have to attribute it to him. Like I said, we need a better candidate that represents conservative Republican values and not the personal brand of Trump. Yeah. And I have to tell you, even though Biden, look, to me, Biden won fair and square, and he will win. Even though he won, this is not good for us. He needs to win by a lot. With this, he doesn't have control of the Senate, lost seats in the House, lost a lot of local elections, all these posters, all these, flipping states. None of that's happened.
No.
We really need to self-reflect. We really have to. Jim, I wish we had more time. I really do. We always run out of time.
We're probably out of time. And in your editing, you're going to have to translate most of what we talked about and insert it.
No, I really wanted to. I've tried to done it before. But this view is too raw and it's too much. I want to hear you. I don't want to sit there and translate when I'm talking to you. That I'm sitting here I really want to hear what you have to say. Yeah. You're one of the most unbiased and fair and logical, reasonable. You're not kidnapped and held on by an ideology. Mm-hmm. Even, and it might seem like but I'm not. So I want to hear you. And I've been under so much information and so much stress.
And it's coming in faster and faster from so many other sources too. Well, let's call it even for today, and then we'll get back together again next week. Maybe we'll be smarter. Maybe the time will expose some greater truths. I don't know. But let's pick it up again next time. And we have a lot to watch for over the next 7 days, Jimmy. And I appreciate all your comments, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you every week.
Jim, you take care and stay safe. And
Yeah.
I appreciate you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay.
Did you stop it?
Yeah. Well, I did. Is it still on?
No, it's okay. Well, the Zoom is on, but the recording is done. The recording is done.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
able to stop it anyway. So,
Okay.
Jim, well, between me and you, I'd rather have Trump win by a lot and win the Senate and House.
Just so we'll get some decision and direction rather than create this.
This is the worst case scenario.
Sure.
But between me and you, let's be honest. Do you really believe there's cheating, ballot cheating? Do you really believe that calling armed people to go to protest? You don't think that is destroying this institution?
Well, I don't know anything about the armed people you're talking about. I haven't heard any of that. I mean, maybe it's going on. I do think that the polls are so, not the polls, but the ballot counting, the ballot taking and the ballot counting is so easily manipulated, particularly with mail-in voting and ballot harvesting and all of those kinds of things. I do think that they're so subject to corruption and fraud that they need to be watched very, very, very carefully. And I think for the only short term, you have to have people from all sides sitting there supervising the process. I don't believe they need to be armed. I don't know anything about that.
But there is both sides. There are volunteers and paid workers from both Republican and Democratic parties in the poll centers counting. This has been like this forever. 4 years ago, no one disputed Trump's winning. In 2000, when Al Gore should have won, it still went through. Why is it only one side inciting violence? You ever hear the Democrats telling people to go protest?
Well, I think the counting is important, but what are they counting? Are they counting valid ballots? I heard some very interesting stuff about Nevada today that they call it the Wild West.
But like you said, it needs to be substantiated, it needs to be proof, and not just from a politically tinged, racially charged.
That's why we have to get it into the courts. And I'm not sure what the actual litigation is going to say. I don't know what Trump's lawsuits allege. I don't know what they're seeking. I don't know what the basis of the law is. And let's say that the Supreme Court or courts in between make certain decisions. They're going to decide on the case, but does that help fix the system? Does that help repair invalid votes? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't know how far the legal system can go in actually making decisions that will affect the outcome. I honestly don't know how that's going to work. And I don't think anybody right now does. When Bush versus Gore happened in 2000, they created new law right then. They had to. I acknowledge one of the things you said, that Al Gore was gracious enough and magnanimous enough when he saw what was going on to step aside. He did not keep fighting. And I think that was
Trump will not stop.
No, I don't think Trump will. I think whatever Trump is, whatever happens, he will fight and fight and fight, even when he is even if and when he is continuously. And
would you still support someone like that? Could we still support someone like that? How could we still?
Well, I'd have to see what the evidence would be and the judgment calls would.
What if I tell you there couldn't be evidence? What if that's why I said I'd rather him win by a lot, because like this, there's no way, because mail-in ballots, forget it. It's a never-ending cycle. We need to have proof. And I don't believe this. How are we going to get proof? Because how is it that it's agreed that we can mail in ballot because of COVID? Most people that do mail in ballots because of COVID, and they're Democrats because they're afraid of it, believe in science. They mail it in. So now you don't want to count them because don't you believe? Okay, let me ask you this: do you believe we should count every vote? If the ballots are being
no, not every vote, every valid vote.
Every valid ballot, right? We should count them, right?
Oh, of course. Okay.
But, so why is there fraud this year, not fraud 4 years ago or 8 years ago or 12 years ago? Why is that?
Oh, I think some people have been planning fraud.
Why didn't they do it 4 years ago so that Trump will lose?
Oh, I think the prevailing wisdom was so strong, the Democrats didn't think they needed to do it.
But this year's the same thing. The polling is so wrong. They have Biden ahead by double digits in every state. They're so far ahead. What's changed this year?
Do you remember what Al Capone was famous for saying?
Al Capone is a godfather in the Chicago outfit. He said many crazy things.
He was famous for saying, "Leave nothing to chance. Bribe all 12 jurors."
Wow.
So in this case, leave nothing to chance. If you anyway, I think we should probably leave it there, Jimmy.
If they're going to do that, then Biden should have won by a lot on all of them. Why?
Yeah, he should have. He should have. But one of the things that I saw just before we came on today is there in Wisconsin there were 100,000 more ballots cast than there were registered voters.
I saw that. That's fake news. They already proved it. That's fake. It was made up.
Well, we'll see.
Fact checked it. I promise you it's fake.
Well, then we got to get to the bottom of it. So
that's scary. See, someone like you and me, they're logical, and we're getting this information. We can't decipher it anymore. Before, you can easily say there's no way. Now you have to look it up and say, oh, it's fake. But we still have a tinge of doubt. That's how they plant that seed of distrust and doubt.
Yeah. When I talked about it to one of my friends, he says, "Don't believe it. Don't believe it. It can't work." Okay, and that's just what you said. So let's see what happens.
No, I should look it up. I looked at. I'll send you a link. I'll send you some of these. Some of these. There's so many that debunk.
Oh yeah.
Take care. Take care, Jim.
Okay. Thanks, Jimmy. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Next week.